right, our first panel today is a panel it's close, near, and dear to my heart. Way back a million years ago, I was one of the early members of Nation Outside, the voice of the formerly incarcerated people in Michigan. And this panel is all folks from Nation Outside, and they're going to be talking about the work they're doing along with Representative Anthony. So I'm going to pass it over to Ashley, my good friend Ashley Goldon, who's going to be the moderator of this panel, and then just pass the mic back and forth.
Thank you, Josh. Good morning, welcome, and thank you for joining us for this Nation Outside panel discussion on jail-based voting rights. I am your moderator, Ashley Goldon, Statewide Program Director of Nation Outside. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Nation Outside, we are a Michigan-based grassroots and advocacy organization entirely led by the justice impacted and formerly incarcerated. We have a growing base of over 2,500 dedicated members and allies in chapters spanning the entire state, including right here in Lansing, Flint, Detroit, Jackson, Traverse City, and Kalamazoo. Our mission is to drive policy and practice reforms that build transformative systems of support for justice-impacted people. Since our founding in 2014, we've been empowering directly impacted peers in their communities with knowledge of the democratic process and inspiring them to civic action through education, advocacy, and leadership. The fact of the matter is that there are over 44,000 public sanctions facing system-impacted people in this country, over 800 of which are specific to Michigan residents like myself. These public sanctions often include lifetime restrictions on housing, employment, transportation, education, finance, ownership, licensure, and benefits. The very things people need in order to thrive and meaningfully contribute to their families and communities. Nation Outside is focused on tackling these barriers. Our recent successes include advocacy around Clean Slate, which we accomplished in conjunction with our partners and Day of Empathy sponsor, Safe and Just Michigan. We've also had local wins around fair chance housing and second chance employment. But the foundation of our work at Nation Outside has always been centered around voting rights and amplifying the too often unheard voices of people impacted by the carceral system. This includes the rights of jail-based voters. We know that the majority of people held in jails are there awaiting trial, meaning they have not yet been sentenced and are therefore eligible to vote. In 2020, Nation Outside partnered with the Genesee County Sheriff's Office and Flint City Clerk to implement jail-based voting in a way never been seen before. Two of our Nation Outside Flint chapter leaders were deputized and thus able to facilitate regular voting registration and absentee voting practices that resulted in hundreds of people in jail participating in the general election. In one special Flint City election last year, jail-based voters comprised 18% of the local vote. Given the significant impact of our rare and unique partnership with the sheriffs and clerks in Genesee County, we wondered what other county jails were doing in order to ensure the rights of Michigan's jail-based voters. And so last year, we partnered with the Voting Access for All Coalition and the Sentencing Project to publish the first ever report on jail-based voting practices in Michigan. We found that every year there are thousands of voter-eligible people being held pretrial in Michigan's jails who are not readily able to access their fundamental right to vote. Today we're here with the experts to learn more about why that is and what can be done about it. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce our expert panelists. First we have Amani Sawari. Ms. Sawari is the writer and founder of SawariMI.org. She is the Justice Services Director of Spread the Vote, She is also the campaign coordinator of Restore Rights to Vote. She has been advocating on behalf of eligible jail-based voters for several years. She is a proud Nation Outside member and Voting Access for All Coalition member. She has extensive experience in organizing and coalition building. In 2016, she graduated from the University of Washington with her bachelor's degree in both media communications and law, economics, and public policy. She was a 2019 Civil Rights Fellow with the Roddenberry Foundation, and one of her visionary publications includes the Right to Vote report. If anyone can be considered an expert on jail-based voting, it is definitely Amani. Thank you for your partnership, Amani. Thank you for your tireless advocacy, and thank you for being here today. Next, we have 68th House District State Representative Sarah Anthony. Rep. Anthony really needs no introduction. She is definitely a people's champion and an ally of many of the reform organizations in attendance today. Rep. Anthony is chair of the House Democratic Caucus. She also serves as vice chair of the Progressive Women's Caucus and the first vice chair of the Michigan Legislative Black Caucus. She has been outspoken about ending prison gerrymandering. She was an avid supporter of clean slate legislation, and she has previously introduced legislation that actually would have granted voting access to incarcerated people housed in MDOC. Rep. Anthony, we love you. We think you're awesome. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be here with us today. And finally, we have Nation Outside's Detroit Regional Coordinator, Darryl Woods. Darryl has been rebuilding Nation Outside's Detroit chapter since he began his work with us in July of last year. Of course, Darryl wears many hats. Leading the Detroit chapter of Nation Outside is only one of them. After spending 29 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections, Darryl is now the president and founder of Fight the Good Fight Consulting. He sits on several distinguished boards, including SADO and Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority. He is extremely active in the community. He has extensive experience organizing with the Voting Access for All Coalition to create a voting block of incarcerated residents in Wayne, Genesee, and Washtenaw County jails. He partnered with Nation Outside and the Detroit branch of the NAACP to register jail-based voters in Wayne County Jail for the 2020 election season, and this year he's back at it again. Darryl, I know my short intro didn't do you justice, brother, but thank you for all you do and thank you for being here with us today. Okay, so let's get started. My first question is for Amani Sawari. Amani, you've been working to help people vote who are held in jail pre-trial for many years. Help our audience understand what are the major barriers facing eligible jail-based voters?
For eligible voters that are incarcerated in especially our jail and detention facilities, the biggest barriers tend to be access to the ballot. So they're eligible to vote, but they're no longer at their primary residence. They're held detained at another place. And their ability to access the ballot completely depends on the correctional staff that are there making the forms available to them. That's the simple thing that we need to fix. But the fact is that there are a lot of other priorities that our jail and correctional facility staff have, and this just isn't a priority for them. So we're hoping with partnerships with Nation Outside, Vote by Mail in Jail, that third-party organizations can come in and fill that gap by making those forms available and also providing the volunteer help needed to facilitate the process of filling out the forms, because we know that our correction staff aren't election experts and we don't expect them to be. So really just making the ballot available and education on how to fill out that ballot, where to send it to. If you're incarcerated in Wayne but you're from Genesee County, you may not know who your Genesee County clerk is. So just that educational piece and the actual access to the forms needed to submit and get access to that ballot.
I access to the ballot is definitely the primary barrier. But let's say all the residents in jail had access to the ballot. Are there other barriers that you guys see in your experience? Darryl?
Well, absolutely. I want to thank you all, Safe and Just Michigan, and under the leadership of John Cooper and everyone that put this together. But to answer your question, definitely there's a number of barriers. There's educational barriers, making sure that people are educated properly, making sure that people have access to who to vote for, understanding that absentee ballot request forms and all the things that they need to request. So there's a number of barriers there. And thank God for Nation Outside and organizations like it, and VAC, and definitely this angel Amani, who has the passion and the compassion to be able to go in these places to be able to educate the people, because many of the people in jail do not understand that they have an unfettered constitutional human right to vote while they're in there on pretrial status. And so it's about educating them and getting the information into them.
Thank you. Definitely, education is a big piece to this. That's something that we've experienced in doing our voter outreach in the jails. Is, a lot of people have given up hope that their vote even counts. So in addition to providing education and providing access, we also like to speak to the residents in jail and give them inspiration and let them know that their voice does matter. So it sounds like there are a number of different barriers, and really opportunity and access being the primary one. Now, Darryl, in your role as Detroit Regional Coordinator of Nation Outside, you are actually currently working with Sheriff Washington in the Wayne County Jail to help institute more supportive voting practices currently. In your experience, what are some of the things the sheriffs can do to help facilitate voting rights of people held pretrial? We heard about third-party community-based organizations, but what are some things specifically that the sheriffs can do to help facilitate people's voting rights?
First and foremost, they need to open up the doors. These doors are closed in many of our counties, and it's sickening that they would not allow access to the jails to be able to get the information in to those who are in their prison or in their jails. Is a really inhumane, is disrespectful and disgraceful that they would close their doors like in the manner in which some of them have. When Amani and Tony reached out to many of these county jails and counties, it was closed doors. But thank God for Sheriff Swanson, thank God for Sheriff Raphael Washington, who have opened up the door and have given us free access to the jails to be able to go talk to everybody in the jail. Everyone need to be contacted, everyone need to be touched. And so we need to have a strong voice in this particular area, because elections has consequences, and those numbers inside the jails represent a large number of our brothers and sisters who should have access to the ballot.
Thank you. So we heard a little bit more about what the sheriffs can do. They definitely play a big role in providing access to voting rights. But there's another entity that has a big stake in this. Amani, what about Michigan clerk's offices? In your experience, how important are clerk's offices to the jail voting process?
Clerk's offices are critical. We can't do this work without the clerk's office being open to helping to facilitate. And so when the clerk's office door isn't open to us, it makes it virtually impossible for us to ensure and guarantee that someone's forms are accepted in a timely manner, because we have to depend solely on the Postal Service to make sure that deadlines are met. And a lot of the times when incarcerated individuals can only rely on the mailroom, they don't know when their mail is going out, if it's going to come or go in a sufficient manner to meet registration deadlines, to meet absentee ballot request form deadlines. So one thing that the clerk's office can do is make themselves available, I would hope on a monthly basis at minimum to come into the jail, but even on a quarterly basis, or setting some times where this is jailed voter registration day. We're gonna go into the jail, we're gonna distribute the forms, we're gonna let them know how the forms need to be filled out, and then we'll collect them and take them back to the clerk's office right across the street in many cases. And so just making sure that there are some specific dates where the clerk is focused on supporting jailed voters, because without having those dates, then third-party organizations have to rely on the mail service and just say, hey, this is the deadline, but this is our recommended deadline to ensure that your ballot, your request for a ballot or your registration information gets to the clerk in a timely manner. So just having the clerk step up in that way and take that prerogative and make it a priority to put jail-based voters on their calendar and go into the jails on a regular basis, and make it a day that jailed voters can look forward to being educated and being incorporated and feel valued and centered in society in that way.
Darryl, do you want to speak to your experience with the clerk's office and chime in on what on what Amani said? You don't have to be specific.
Well, sometimes these clerks are on the ballot, and sometimes they are afraid that they're going to get some votes against them. And so we need more independence. This is a sacred right that a clerk should not get in the way of, or anyone should get in the way of. You know, so absolutely, we need to speak forcefully to our clerks, to let them understand that those people that are languishing inside the jails, they are presumed innocent, and that they need to have their ballot. They need to vote. Not only to get a ballot, they need a vote. And so we have worked with the clerk office in the city of Detroit in 2020 to be able to take the ballots in. She sent someone in to bring the ballots in, but she need to deputize, or she need to assign people to go in there at all times. You know, 2021 was a struggle. And so we are in the jail early this year, and we got an early start. We started in January, and we would go there all the way until Election Day and beyond to make sure that people have access to the ballot. But we need to send a clear message to our clerk's office that we will not tolerate them not allowing people inside the jails to vote.
Thank you. And not just, you know, having strong conversations with them and making sure that they understand the importance, but also making sure they're properly resourced. You know, clerks' offices are small, and sometimes we're dealing with jails. What's the capacity of Wayne County Jail? About 1,600?
They about 2,000.
They're about 2,000. And so when you have a clerk's office with, you know, a handful of people or less, that's a incredible volume to be able to process all of those absentee ballots. So making sure that the clerk's office are properly resourced is important too. Okay, so we heard a little bit about what the sheriffs can do. We heard a little bit about what the clerk's office can do. It sounds like both would have to take on a greater role to ensure voting rights for jail-based voters consistently. Rep. Anthony, I know that you're an avid advocate for voting rights, and I know that you understand the business of politics. My question is twofold. Should laws be created that require a voting process for eligible jail-based voters, and is it reasonable for these laws to include specific directions for county sheriffs and clerks' offices?
Well, thank you. It's always good to see you with this sharp suit on. And thank you all for having me. I am definitely not an expert, so I'm honored to be on the panel, but I am a passionate advocate, as you mentioned. This is just near and dear to my heart. And I'm glad that you all are having this meeting right here, right in the middle, right between the House of Representatives and the State Senate. And you can look at the governor's ceremonial office. This is the people's house, and this is a critical issue for the people to be tackling. And oftentimes, everyone else comes to these lobbies to lobby for their issues, right? And so this is just as important of issue as any other thing that we should be discussing right now. And it should take priority because, as you mentioned, it is a fundamental right to vote. And we are seeing across the state, across the country, a dismantling, a strategic effort to limit voting access, not just for folks who are incarcerated, but all across the spectrum. We are seeing it. It is deliberate, it is intentional, it is forceful, and it is effective. It is happening across the country. And so, but this conversation is often missed. And so I've been thinking a lot about not only the roles of the sheriffs and the clerks, which in my opinion, I think it's been said, but these are elected officials as well. And we as the people can hold elected officials accountable by ensuring that they are reflecting our values, our desires, our needs. And a part of that is access to vote. Now, I was a county commissioner before I was a state representative, so I know that budgets are thin and there are competing priorities. But the fundamental right to vote should be a part of that. My grandma would say there is a nickel in that dollar. So I think that we absolutely need to be prioritizing that. But there's a role that we play at the state level to ensure that clerks and sheriffs have the resources. So to answer that twofold question, absolutely and absolutely. I absolutely think that we should not only be a partner at the state level. Anytime we are in this building, I'm gonna say they, because I don't vote against it, but anytime they are trying to dismantle funding for revenue sharing that goes to local governments, that has an impact there. But there's also an imperative, right? There's a lot of autonomy on the local level. And I think that that is a good thing by and large, because these local clerks and sheriffs often reflect the priorities of the community, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they need to hear from the populace to say this is a priority. So in addition to funding, I also think that there needs to be some strategic direction in the form of policy. Now, you know I'm good for introducing bills and fighting hard for them and advocating and sometimes being obnoxious about it. But I think that that's what's needed in order for all of these competing priorities that happen on this very floor to actually get across the finish line. And so, right now, everyone's been talking about this surplus of money that has come into our state, right? We have an influx of money. And, budgets are moral documents. You show me where you're putting your money, I'll show you what you care about. And right now, I'm not seeing the energy, I'm not seeing the push to ensure that this population of our people have the right to vote. In fact, I'm seeing the opposite. And so it's going to take folks like you, folks like me, to really come together and make this a priority. And I love the work that Nation Outside and these other third parties are doing to push into our jails and make sure that this happens. But I'm a visionary. I see a world in which we don't need this, that we kind of eliminate the need for outside entities, that this becomes business as usual, that there are AVs, there's access to materials and ballots and information, and folks understand which ballot they would have access to. So if you find yourself in a jail in, I don't know, in St. Louis, but you live in Detroit, you would know what the local millage is, right? There is lots to do with this this issue. So it's going to take real partnership, but also a fire in our belly. It's going to take prioritization. So that's a long-winded way of saying yes and yes.
Thank you. Now, Rep. Anthony, you recently, or in the last year or so, introduced legislation that actually took voting access for incarcerated people a step further. Can you share with us a little bit more about your intentions and a little bit more about that bill that you introduced?
Yeah, and I won't be too long-winded, but we talk a little bit, again, that this should be a priority. And when we talk about voting rights, I see it as very connected to human rights. Just because you find yourself incarcerated for whatever reason, pre-trial, you are still a human being. You come from a community, you come from a family. You don't stop caring about your daughter or your son in a community because you find yourself incarcerated. Your spouse or significant other is still paying local taxes. Your mother is still going to need health care, housing, food access, transportation. So you still have a voice and a right to everything the society has to offer. And I think that voting is a critical part of that. So I've been a part of a number of bill packages that are designed to crack open this system. Because again, a part of when I was running for office, either at the local level or the state level, I looked every voter in the eye and said, I'm going to look out for you and I'm going to lift up your voice when I get to the halls of power. And that included everybody. It didn't include whatever your status in life was going to be, whether you're going to vote for me or not. And so these various bill packages, expanding the rights to vote, ending prison gerrymandering, these are significant pieces of legislation that unfortunately, again, political will, have not seen the light of day. We cannot get hearings, despite advocates, some that are in this room, have been knocking on the door asking committee chairs to give the bill a hearing. I believe that our voices are powerful, so sometimes just the hearing would change hearts and minds. But unfortunately, again, we have not been able to get hearings on these bills. So we will continue to advocate, we'll continue to reintroduce, and hopefully if we start to see some shifts in power, we can likely see these things on the governor's desk for a signature. So we're going to keep fighting, but we do have a long way to go to have these types of bills be priority.
Thank you. Yeah, the end goal, you made a great point earlier. The end goal in what we're doing with jail-based voting rights is not to, be the crutch for the sheriffs and the clerks. Our end game is seeing policy in place that would make these processes regular and consistent. So that way, if in the event that a nonprofit that's helping out with these things goes away for whatever reason, that people will still have the access to their voting rights. So this is the last question, and then I'll see what time it is. We might be able to take some questions from the audience, and this is for the entire panel. All of you take pride in your ability to work with both sides of the aisle. What do you say to those who think jail-based voting rights is a partisan issue?
To those who think that jail-based voting is a partisan issue, I would simply say that it's impossible for it to be a partisan issue because we live in a society that's made voting the actual voice, the transactional point for every single person that lives within this democracy. So if I don't have a token to use, then the society cannot function according to the way that it was built to function. Every single person incarcerated in our society is affected by the laws and policies that are passed through the vote. And so because they're affected and their families are affected, their loved ones are affected, their children are affected, and if they get commissary funds, they're paying taxes as well. If they're employed by some entity, whether it be private company or the actual facility themselves, they're paying taxes off of their salaries as well, even if it is just $40 a month here in Michigan. That's pretty good for a seeing eye dog trainer. And so they are a part of this society. They are incorporated and enfolded in so many ways, whether it is as an exploited labor force or not. They should have a voice, and they should be fully, wholly folded within our society and in our democracy by having that token. That's the only piece that's missing, and that looks too much like chattel slavery to me. So because of that, it is essential that we not only create bridges and pathways and close gaps for people to use the token that they have, but in my opinion as well, that everyone receives a token. It's not a partisan issue.
So as we are currently discussing our state budget, and as these many bills related to these issues tend to not get a hearing, is this a partisan issue? I think my response would be, prove it.
I would say that this is not about politics. This is about human beings who are languishing in jails. Some of those human beings are actually innocent, and we know that. You know, and I think it's sickening to play games with these human beings' rights. And so we don't have time to play games and engage into partisan foolery because everybody in the jail is not going to vote the same way. You know, people are going to vote their conscience and how they feel and their values. I went into jail and some people yelled out, yes, give me the ballot, I'm going to vote for Trump. You know, but yeah, we got him the ballot, you know, because that's his right. If that's what he wanted to do or she wanted to do, then vote for whoever you want to vote for. And so this is not a game. You know, these people are human beings who are being denied their fundamental rights. And this, it has to end, you know, soon, you know, because, you know, the direction that we going in as a nation is like we're turning on each other and turning against each other. And we can't turn against those men and women that's in jails because they're going to come back out and be our neighbors. And so we want to franchise them and we want to give them the tools that they need to win in life. And so to say it's partisanship, no way, no how. And these groups that are involved with this would not even participate in that type of foolishness because we understand that we need Republicans, we need Democrats to move this thing along, to move legislation along, you know, so let's not get off into that part of it.
Agreed. Thank you. So that concludes my questions. I think we have time for one or two questions from the audience. If anybody, I'll walk around with the microphone. We got one right here.
And thank you. My name is Edward Sanders. I'm a former juvenile lifer without parole, and I spent 43 years in prison. I'm concerned about county jails. You know, the time that I was in the county jail, I had to periodically take and come down almost every 6 months for probate court because I had a child. So I had to return back to the county jail during my prison stay, whether I was in Marquette, whether I was in Huron Valley, or wherever. So I know what the county jail consists of. I'm presently hearing a sheriff that's appointed, not elected. In fact, we won't call that person a sheriff because no one holds an office by appointment. The people have to certify. And the person is saying, we doing that. He's looking at his opponent's web page and everything that the person is talking about in terms of social work. He is saying he's doing that. He's not doing that. I know what the county jail consists of. I've seen the overcrowdedness of the county jail. We slept on what they call, you know, the things that you put, cadavers. That's what they sleep on the floor in the county jail, okay, because the bunks are overcrowded. So as a human being, you are asked to lay on something that was intended for a deceased person. What do that say about you? What do that say about the jailer that is asking you to get into that thing? Okay, you either get in it or they'll put you in it. Okay, so so we can't allow that, you know, where someone that is now seeking office that has presided over this type of practice and is openly saying, we are doing that already every time somebody proposes an idea. No, we want you to do it. And we don't want you to do what law enforcement is too often doing, is saying, don't believe your lying eyes. Okay, so yes, my question is, thank you, because I was making a statement, but I'm very passionate about this, and thank you, I appreciate that. Because I do, we have a lawmaker here, and I thank her for being here. That's very important. In your legislation, we seen that there was research that took and acknowledged that there were multiple categories of people that were in our county jails that should have never been there. They were never intended to be in that space. So I'm asking you as a lawmaker, I know you guys are considering legislation. The Michigan Supreme Court is looking at this matter. Please put something in there to give a county jail sheriff the power to be able to go to a court and bring it to the court's attention that the courts, the circuit courts and others are putting people in his or her space that are not supposed to be there, and give them the authority to say that we want to reject them. We don't want them in our county jail. If the prosecutor want that person to be arrested for not having insurance or whatever the issue is, that they take them and put them in their office. Let the judge put them in their chamber, or the prosecutor take them up to their office. Thank you.
You tricked me. You ain't never had a question. We got a question right here.
Yes, hi, I'm Jacqueline Curry. My question, we're speaking on voting and voting rights, okay? So I can stay on subject here. I know you're in Detroit. Have anyone looked into that for Oakland County? Which I'm kind of sure they have iron gates and clads. So have anyone? Can you answer anyone?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good question, and I won't put Ms. Hankey on the spot. But Janelle, you said yes, you have something to say to that. Janelle is our Flint Regional Coordinator. Oh, we do have a plan for Oakland County? We're working our way into one jail at a time. But again, the overarching goal is to get state legislature passed so that sheriff's offices have an automatic process. And this will conclude and it will wrap up.
Absolutely, and it's going on. Michigan Liberation, where Earl Burton and Tim and a number of those men and women have engaged Oakland County. They have registered people to vote inside the Oakland County Jail in the past, and so we continue to support their efforts. It's not a one-size-fit-all approach, but as Janelle said, who is deputized, and has done phenomenal work. We're making our way to every county, and Amani probably can speak to the many counties that they have reached out to, and VAC has reached out to as a team to be able to engage the clerks as well as the sheriff's department. So great question. So it has happened in Oakland County, and I'm sure that Michigan Liberation will continue that effort, and we will support it as a Nation Outside as well.
Thank you. Amani, you want to speak to that?
There were recently, in 2020, Michigan Liberation was successfully able to work with Oakland County Jail. 2021, there were some changes in administration that blocked our access. I personally and many of our volunteers that we work with have called every single county jail in the state, all 83 counties, just to ask the question of what are you doing? What is your process when it comes to inmate voting? And the vast majority are saying there's no process in place. There's no legislation that tells us we have to do this, so we don't need to do it. And I've also been told, we don't have the capacity due to COVID. There's a lot of excuses that make sense, but the actual moral argument of why we're not doing this never makes sense to me. When the county clerk is often right across the street from the county jail, why is it that there's not a relationship and a direct communication about who is eligible to vote there? The county jail is actually a perfect opportunity to ask someone, are you registered to vote? Are you interested in voting? As soon as they're booked, that should be a booking question. The Genesee County Jail is doing that, thanks to Nation Outside. And other jails have finally thought to think, oh, we should add that to our booking process. And then we'll have the information we need to make the county clerk's job easier. Now they don't have to survey all 2,000. They know exactly which 300 people aren't registered and can target those. So those are some simple things that can be done in our county jails with the support of the wonderful organizations and representatives that we have that advocate for this issue. And that's all I wanted to add. So Oakland County Jail, we're looking for you. We're ready to work with you.
Okay, do we have time for one more question? That's it? One more question? Okay. We'll take one more question and then we'll wrap up.
I'd like to ask the representative what we can do to, if there is anything that we can do to get a hearing on this bill.
So you could absolutely contact the chair. And I think the organizers are collecting email addresses for this event. So if you signed in, I will, excuse me, I believe it was referred to the Judiciary Committee, which is Representative Graham Filler. So you can contact him and just request a hearing. We have a sample letter that you can use so you don't have to try to, wordsmith anything. And just honestly, individual stories matter. Sharing the stories of yourself, your loved ones, why you think that this is an important issue can go a long way. So I would just encourage you to request a hearing as like a citizen co-sponsor to do just that. So we'll share that information. And thank you.
Okay. So, and we have more, hopefully more legislation coming around jail-based voting, but we'll keep you guys posted. Make sure that you guys subscribe to our newsletter, sign up with our Nation Outside table before you leave. If you're interested in learning more or would like a copy of our report on jail-based voting, we have copies for you. Again, stop by our resource table on the way out. We are only as loud as the voices of our members, so please get involved, come see us. We are always recruiting members and allies in the fight for a more fair and effective justice system. We have swag for you. You'll get access to our newsletter, upcoming events. Be on the lookout for our calls to action. Our CTAs are the language of change. If you know, you know. If you would like to revisit this discussion, you will be able to find a recording of the panel on Nation Outside's YouTube channel. Please visit us at nationoutside.org, like our Facebook page, and follow us on social media. Before we go, I just want to acknowledge our panelists one more time. Give them a hand one more time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you again to our Day of Empathy event sponsor, Safe and Just Michigan. And thank you all for joining us in the audience, especially our members and allies. Everybody have a great rest of your day. And remember, we are more than a moment, we are a movement. Thank you.
What a great way to start the day. Thanks to our panelists. I think they did a great job. One more round of applause for our panel. I often say that our rights matter most when we're the most at risk. It doesn't mean much to have rights that you can only exercise when you're privileged and powerful. The rights you need the most are the ones when you're at your worst moment. And so people who have not yet been found guilty of a crime have the right to vote, but a lot of jails don't let people exercise that right to vote. And that's what they're working to fix. I thought it was a great panel. In a couple minutes, we'll have our second panel, which will be on bail reform, a group of legislation. So just wait about 15 minutes and mingle, and maybe we'll have another introduction here in a few minutes to some